It's time for the latest edition of What's the Word, the radio news show that gets you up to date on Area 1's transformation and how it'll affect you. I'm Army Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and now here's the host of What's the Word, Mr. Frank Fisher of the USAG Red Cloud Public Affairs Office.
Thanks, Sergeant Crawford. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of What's the Word, the news program that keeps you up to date on Area 1's transformation and how it'll affect you. Today we're taking a second and closer look at a topic we first told you about in March. That's the big effort that kicks off next week to help a very large body of 2nd Infantry Division soldiers go through out-processing before leaving Area 1. They're leaving because their unit, the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team, will inactivate this summer. So, the soldiers will either leave Korea or, in some cases, go to new assignments in other parts of Korea. Taking their place in the 2nd Infantry Division lineup, by the way, will be brigades that will come to Korea for 9-month rotations. But today, we focus on those soldiers who'll be leaving Area 1 and on how the big job of getting them out processed will affect the business hours of certain services on our Area 1 installations. We'll also have some helpful reminders for soldiers who have to turn in their gear during the out processing. And we'll have an important practical word for soldiers who own their own vehicles and want to bring those vehicles with them to duty stations elsewhere in Korea. Getting so many soldiers out processed efficiently is, of course, a very big task. It'll involve not only the soldiers themselves, but also the work of a great many employees from various offices in Area 1. Those employees will be very busy at the Camp Casey Community Activity Center. They'll be there staffing the different tables and other stations that soldiers will pass through during their clearing process. All of that will have at least some effect on the Area 1 community. For instance, some offices may have to change their hours because their staff will be working on the out-processing. Another busy place during the out-processing surge, this one on Camp Humphreys, will be the Central Issue Facility, better known as CIF, where soldiers will come to turn in their equipment. Here with the latest word on all these things are today's guests. They are Mr. Bud Rader, Director of Human Resources with the U.S. Army Garrison Red Cloud and Area 1. This is his second time with us on What's the Word. Captain Michael Heberer, Operations Officer with the USAG Red Cloud and Area 1's Directorate of Emergency Services. And Sergeant First Class Angeline Samuels, Support Operations Center NCOIC with the Logistics Readiness Center Red Cloud. And between interview segments, as always, my broadcast partner, AFN Casey's Army Sergeant Crystal Crawford, will play the music you've come to count on from AFN Casey, the Eagle. Mr. Rader, Captain Heberer, Sergeant Samuels, welcome to What's the Word.
Thank you.
Mr. Rader, it's my understanding that because of the big out-processing surge, some services that Area 1 customers rely on may be affected. In a moment, we'll look at which ones those will be, but first, overall, are we talking about services closing, operating on limited hours, or changes of some other kind?
Yes, we are. We're talking about all of the above because the different services have different staffing levels. So some of the services may have to close during the time that we are out processing. Some will have to cut back on services because their staff will be busy. Some may change their hours. So it depends on the service that the customer needs and the time of day that they need the service.
And overall, what will be the time period for all of this?
Well, we expect it to start around the 28th of May, and it'll be going almost daily until about the 3rd of July. 3rd of July should be the last day that we see services out processing.
And what is it that would make it necessary for some of these services to alter their hours? Why would that be?
Well, for example, the cable TV service is a very limited staff. There's like 2 people there. And in order to man the table at the out processing center, one of those guys are going to have to be gone. So billing may be affected, customer service, questions and answers may be affected. We also have one ID or a ration control clerk in all of Area 1. So we're going to have to make arrangements to have those services covered while we out-process people for ration control.
So it can even come down to there being just one person in a particular office for the entire area.
Right, it could be. And that's, as I say, that some services that will be the case.
Right. Well, in our next segment, we'll take a look at this service by service and ask you to just give us a little more insight into which specific services we know to be or expecting will be affected. Right now, here's Sergeant Crawford with the break.
Yes, we're listening to What's the Word. Keep it tuned right here. I'll be right back with your weather, exchange rate, and gas prices. Armored
Brigade Combat Team Soldiers that starts next Thursday. And one of our guests, Mr. Bud Rader, the USAG Red Cloud and Area 1's Director of Human Resources, was telling us that certain services in Area 1 will have limited hours or may even have to close because some of their staff members will be involved in helping the soldiers clear. Mr. Rader, taking it service by service, what can you tell us to expect?
Well, on the out-processing checklist, there are 19 different stations that you have to out-process. So you can't go into all of them. But you can figure the services that are run, not Army services, for example, the telephone exchange, the telephone where you buy your cell phone, that's with the PX. They have very limited staff. Again, with the cable TV, very few people in the staff. So the days that we have a lot of soldiers processing, and there are days where there are going to be 160, 170 soldiers, but there will also be days when there'll be 300 to 400 soldiers. Those days may be very hard on those guys to man that table all day long, and so the customer may feel a lot of pain. If he needs a new ID card or he needs a new ration control card, and there are only one deep positions, so you may have to delay a couple hours before you go in and get your card.
And is it likely that those different offices would be letting the community know, or that the Garrison would be able to post notices on Facebook, for example, saying that this or that office will have altered hours on a certain day?
We have advised them to do that, to go on social media and let them know. But again, people get sick during the week. That happens. People have to take leave. So I would suggest before you go to a service organization asking for service, give them a call. See what their manning situation is that day, and if they've had to change their hours or have to close that day.
Thank you. The next thing we want to look at is the situation of soldiers who will be part of this out-processing, but who will not necessarily be leaving Korea. In fact, won't be leaving Korea, but will be moving to duty stations elsewhere in Korea. And we're looking at the situation of those who own their own vehicles, have POVs, and on what they do to transfer their vehicles from Area 1 to other areas within Korea. Captain Heberer, what can you tell us about that? What do those soldiers need to do?
It's actually very similar to moving state to state. You deregister in one state and you'll re-register in another state. So if you're leaving Area 1 and relocating to any of the other areas in Korea, you need to bring in your appropriate paperwork for your privately owned vehicle, your insurance registration, if you had an exception of policy to have a vehicle registered, in your orders, and you'll come fill out a 32 EK form at Mod Hall, pass an ID, and we will go ahead and check for tickets if you have any outstanding tickets with the Korean government for speeding or parking. If you do, then you will be instructed on how to go pay those. Once you've paid them, you come back into Mod Hall. We will stamp your deregistration out process and paperwork for Area 1. That packet will be handed to the Korean government employee who is in Mod Hall and pass an ID only in the afternoons between 13 and 16:30. And he will make annotation in the Korean computer registration system to transfer your vehicle to your new unit of assignment. And this is critical because you will not be able to out-process where you're going to if you never in-process that area. You will be forced to come back to Dongdaecheon to out-process your vehicle when you get ready to leave Korea. So it's very critical that you do it properly, come in and out-process. When you do that, you'll be given 10 days to end process at your new location within Korea.
Just to draw a line under that important point, from what I just heard you say, my understanding is that if, for instance, I were a soldier who was being reassigned from Area 1 down to Area 4, all the way down in Daegu, and if I had a POV, if I did not come in and do what you just said needs to be done, then when I would get to Daegu, to my new unit, it would be a no-go, and I'd have to get that vehicle squared away by coming all the way back up to Area 1. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Back to Sergeant Crawford with the break.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Keep it locked right here, guys. Got more great information coming your way about the transformation, but first, here's your Casey update. Off the 50 Shades of Grey soundtrack, that was The Weekend with Earned It right here on AFN Casey, I'm Army Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and now here's the host of What's the Word, Mr. Frank Fisher of the USAG Red Cloud Public Affairs Office.
Thanks again, Sergeant Crawford. Hello again. We're talking about how the big out-processing surge for soldiers from the from the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team will affect the Area 1 community. And we're back with Captain Michael Heberer, who has an important point to add to what he said in the earlier segment about soldiers who need to register their vehicles, transfer their vehicles from Area 1 to other parts of Korea.
Yes, sir. I'd just like to reiterate for all members that are preparing to depart Area 1 that own a privately owned vehicle to come early to Mod Hall and ensure that you understand the process so that your departure here will not be delayed on trying to resolve matters with the Korean government and SOFA registered vehicles.
Thank you. And also, Captain Heberer, a brief question about the busing and the other transportation arrangements that are being made for these soldiers from 1ABCT. Is that likely to affect the ability of community members to get around the installations either by vehicle or on foot?
Well, throughout the month of June and starting the end of May, you may experience some minor delays in and around the Casey CAC as soldiers are unloading or loading from buses, shuttle buses and taxis. As always, use caution while you're operating motor vehicles in that area. There will be a lot of troop movement, and please stay off your phone while driving.
Always good to remind people of staying off the phone while driving, isn't that so? We turn now to another aspect of this whole process of the surge in-out processing, and that's the need that soldiers will have to bring their gear, some of their gear, for turn-in to the Central Issue Facility on Camp Humphreys. And with us for the word on that is Sergeant First Class Angeline Samuels, Support Operations NCOIC with the Logistics Readiness Center Red Cloud. Sergeant Samuels, what is it exactly what are the main items of equipment that soldiers need to bring to the CIF?
Sir, all soldiers have been briefed by their S4s on the specific items that needs to be brought over to the CIF during the deactivation process. These items most will be the IOTV, the individual protective gear, the rucksack. These items must be cleaned and dried prior to coming over to the CIF for turn-in.
I understand that's an especially important point to the staff of the CIF, that things be turned in a condition that is both clean and dry. Is that correct?
That is correct. All items that we receive in the Central Issue Facility will at one point be issued either to another soldier or will be turned in to hire. We cannot turn in those items dirty.
And if they were, let's say somebody brought in a rock or something that was wet, maybe they had made a good faith effort to clean it, but it was wet, would that create a problem?
That will create a delay. And the reason why we cannot take these items wet or dirty, we cannot leave an item that is wet laying around. It might grow mold, mildew, and so forth, and that is no good for no one. So we ask them to have those items clean and dry prior.
It's been a long time since I was a soldier, and so I'm going to need to ask this. Is there a recommended time by which a soldier should have his or her gear cleaned and dried? How much time should they, by what point before turn-in should it be dried, cleaned and dried?
Personally, I would recommend that if you're getting ready to go through the CIF turning process, I would recommend it at least a day before. Give it time to actually air dry or going through the drying process prior to coming. Because if it's wet, unfortunately, we cannot take it wet or dirty.
A day is
I would say
enough?
at least a day to give it enough time to air dry.
Mm-hmm.
And now the temperature is getting warm outside, so it will dry faster than it would be in the wintertime.
In the case of the CIF clearing process, the one that's being set up for these soldiers from the 1ABCT, it's my understanding that the intent is to make this a kind of one-stop shop process. Tell us a little about that, please. What'll it be like?
Okay, so at the Hovey Gym, starting on the 27th of May, we will have stations set up to better facilitate this the volume move for the 1ABCT. We will have a split operation between the CIF and Hovey Gym. This will help the soldiers who are leaving to have no delays because they have been briefed on the procedures already. So basically they will go to the Hovey Gym and we will process them. They'll go to each station and turn in their gear, and there will be somebody there to process their paperwork. The CIF itself will also have the normal operations for everyone who is, PCSing or going to another duty station.
So it's not only going to be the CIF itself, but also the fitness center on Camp Hovey.
That's correct.
Just to accommodate all those soldiers who need to be processed.
To accommodate everyone in Area 1. That's
Great.
correct.
Thank you. Back to Sergeant Crawford for the break.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Fisher. Get you this break and then some more music coming your way. Michelle Branch on AFN. You're listening to What's the Word? And we're back. I'm Army Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and now here's the host of What's the Word, Mr. Frank Fisher of the USAG Red Cloud Public Affairs Office.
Thank you, Sergeant Crawford. Hello again. And if you're just joining us, we've been looking today at several important things related to the big out-processing surge that will start next Thursday when soldiers of the 1st Armored Brigade Combat Team begin clearing so they can depart Korea, or in some cases, move to assignments in other parts of Korea. With me in the studio right now is one of our guests, Sergeant First Class Angeline Samuels, and she's going to tell us a little bit more on what she was speaking about in the earlier segment, and that's related to the equipment that soldiers will be turning in at the CIF and the Camp Hovey Fitness Center. Sergeant Samuels, you want to add something to what you said earlier?
Sure, sir. Just please remember to go by the list that your unit has provided. Every unit was given a list of items that needs to be turned in, and for some soldiers that list might be a little bit different depending on what's on your clothing record. But any questions that you have pertaining to CIF, you can contact Mr. Scruggs, Louis Scruggs, at the CIF. He is the property book officer at 730-5442.
You want to repeat that number just one more time?
Yes, 730-5442. And his name is Mr. Louis Scruggs, and he is the property book officer for the CIF.
Thank you. Let me just recap for our listeners some of the main points that were made today on our broadcast. One of them is that during the out-processing period, which is starting, anticipate going to some place on the installation where you need to do some business, whether it's ration control, for example, or cable TV. Call there first and ask them if their hours are the same or changed in any way because of the big out-processing surge. Also, a reminder that we've had from another of our guests that if you're a soldier and you are going to be part of this departure from Area 1, if you are going to a duty station here in Korea, if you're going from Area 1 to another part of Korea and you happen to own your own vehicle, it's critical that as soon as possible you go to Maud Hall, go to the Pass and ID office, and find out exactly what you have to do so that you can properly do the paperwork for that vehicle to be transferred to your next unit. Captain Heberer, who was one of our guests, reminded us that soldiers who end up arriving at one of their duty stations here in Korea, that's something to keep in mind. And we've also been reminded that soldiers who will be turning in their gear as part of their clearing process should make sure that it's clean and dry, and do that a few days ahead of time so that when you bring it to the CIF for turn-in, it doesn't create problems for them and doesn't hold them back from being able to give that equipment to another soldier for use. Well, we thank our guests today, and we invite you to join us again 2 weeks from now on What's the Word. Our next broadcast will be May 28th from 3 to 4 p.m. here on AFN Casey Radio. I'm Frank Fisher of the Area 1 Public Affairs Office, and here is Sergeant Crawford.
I'm Sergeant Crystal Crawford, and as Mr. Fisher said, thanks for joining us for this edition of What's the Word.